Hey everyone, Silvio Perez here, and welcome to today's episode of Behind the Ads, where we learn how some of the fastest growing companies approach digital advertising. In today's episode, I have a very special guest joining me, none other than Tara Robertson, Senior Manager of Demand Generation at Chili Piper and the host of the Demand Gen Chat. Welcome, Tara.
Thanks so much for having me, Silvio. Excited for this.
I am super pumped for this conversation. I love what you guys are doing at Chili Piper, and I feel like there's so many nuggets that we're going to get into and really just get an inside look on how you guys are approaching your paid experimentation and your paid strategy as a whole. So taking it at the highest of levels, what is Chili Piper and what do you guys do and who do you serve?
Sure. Yeah. So at the very highest level, we help B2B revenue teams book more meetings. So usually if you're in B2B, your goal as a marketing team, as a sales team, is to book demos, book meetings with your ideal prospects. So we make that super easy to qualify and route those leads, whether they're on your website coming inbound or for your outbound sales reps.
That's a very sticky product, I can imagine. If you have something that's helping you book more meetings faster, so that's awesome. And I'm just curious, in terms of the company at a high level, what is your paid strategy look like?
Yeah, so at a super high level, I manage all of our paid myself, so I can speak to it granular too, but at the high level, I just try to get in front of our ICP with content that either educates them or sells them on why they should think about looking at Chili Piper. So just to take a step back, our ICP is, again, we're in B2B, so we sell mostly to B2B marketing teams, and we have a focus on teams that use either Salesforce or HubSpot as their CRM. So it's a bit of a niche within B2B, but those are our ideal prospects that I want to get in front of. And I would say probably around 70% of our paid social is in that education bucket. So not trying to sell anything, really just using content from our blog, content that we have creating for other reasons within the company. We also, obviously, you mentioned we have our podcast Demand Gen Chat, so I repurpose clips from that on paid. And then our founders also do a lot of thought leadership content as well. So trying to leverage that in our paid efforts.
Go subscribe to Demand Gen Chat, everybody. Check it out. It's pretty awesome. That's okay. So 70% is on quote unquote what we call creating demand, essentially building that.
Yeah. Call that education, call that creating demand. Yeah.
Got it. And then 30% is what more on capture. So people who are in market, they know they got a problem and you're trying to drive that.
Exactly. Yeah. I spend probably another 10% is promoting our newsletter. So we don't do much gated content at all at Chili Piper. It's one way that you can, basically we can be top of mind is getting you on our newsletter. I'll email you once a month. Similar to subscribing to Demand Gen Chat, it's very educational, top of funnel. Yep. We're not going to bug you for a demo. And then that last 20-ish% is retargeting people that we already know are in our ICP, trying to get them to learn a bit more about Chili Piper. Maybe we're showing you a customer story or someone that's had a really great win using our products. And then lastly, trying to get you to book a demo, which obviously we use our own software for, but we really just want to bring in those demos for the sales team.
So just unpacking that 70% a little bit, 70% is remarkably significant in terms of budget allocated towards something like that, where in most B2B orgs, especially from the ones that I've audited and talked to, it's usually the opposite. They have 70% on capture. If they're lucky, 30% on actually creating a brand and building that know, like, and trust. I think of it as like an audience, essentially, is what you're going after. What does that look like? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn? What are the channels? And yeah, we'll just start there.
Yeah, so we're mostly on LinkedIn. Obviously, we want to target B2B when they're thinking about work, so that's a great place to get them. But we are able to target them on channels like Facebook, on Instagram. That's usually where we play around with retargeting. So it's people that are known audiences to us. And then just taking it a step back, you mentioned that split is a little unusual. In my past roles, it's been more like 90% lead gen and 10% educational. Yeah. I think it's changed a lot. I was lucky that when I joined Chili Piper, the company was already very anti-gated content, anti-ebook, all of that stuff. So I came in at a good time where I was ready to move on from that model. And I think a lot of marketers were, but the company internally that had already been sold on that. So came in at a lucky time for me as a marketer.
Got it. Makes sense. On the capture side, what does that look like?
Yeah, so I mentioned our newsletter. We play around a lot with lead gen forms there. Obviously, we just want your email. We don't need to know anything else about you if you want to be on our newsletter. So we do that. Mostly, again, LinkedIn, but we do see some success on Facebook with some retargeting audiences. And then we don't do too much bottom of funnel in terms of lead gen forms. We find driving them to our site, especially because we use Chili Pepper, our own product. A lot of the time, people want to see that experience on a website and see what that looks like.
Are you doing any paid search?
Yes. So paid search is a whole other,
Okay,
I should say that 70%, I'm talking just paid social budget when I say that. In my mind, paid search is way beyond demand creation, and it's purely capture, at least the way we run it at Chili Pepper. So I don't even consider that as a bucket. It's more just purely on the demand capture side. We have Google ads. I want to learn more about YouTube. I'm sure there's a ton more we could be doing there. We dabble in it, I would say. I'm sure you do. Yeah, I know you have some great content on that I need to check out. And then on Bing, surprisingly, we've gotten some pretty decent enterprise leads come in. So I'm probably never going to turn that channel off, even though it's a weird one, but it's worth trying for B2B.
A lot of people don't know that you can use bid adjustments based on LinkedIn targeting in Microsoft. So you can, for example, for everyone listening, like a little tip is you can add in a job function filter on top of your Microsoft search campaigns, Bing, and do a negative bid adjustment of 90% to help reduce the amount of unqualified clicks you're getting from people in those different job functions.
That's a really good tip for broader terms, especially. We're pretty niche on search, so we don't really worry too much about it. But if you're going really broad, that's a great way to narrow that down. You can also just import your Google Ads campaigns, which is really makes it really easy to just, it's almost like you're not having a new channel to manage in some ways.
Absolutely, yeah. So just to recap, huge focus on content distribution, creating demand, much minor focus on capture, and you must be building so much goodwill ahead of time that it fuels your retargeting efforts, right? And you're just creating this, I almost think of it as like this echo chamber, right? You're putting people more through the top of funnel. You're creating that awareness that no one trusts. You're retargeting those folks later down. And then of course, you're using results in advance by actually using your own product to get people to convert. So that's awesome. I'm curious, if you're spending 70% on the creation side, what does your process look like for creating content and copy and creative? Because, you know, you're investing 70%. I'm curious what goes into that.
Yeah, it's a bunch of things. We have a couple different streams of content that we're always producing as a marketing team. So obviously I mentioned our newsletter, so I'm always looking at other people's content to see what can we learn from. Metadata is one example, but there's tons in the space that are creating great stuff. We also have our podcast that I mentioned, Demand Gen Chat, and then working with partners is another big channel for us on the content side. So we run a lot of webinars with them, we host events, and we try to capture content on, like, mostly video content, obviously, but when we're in person at those events, and then figure out, okay, who would care about this? Would marketing ops care about this video? Maybe we can get that in front of them. And especially if it's something super timely off of an event.
That's a huge tip for people going to events, especially when they're sinking thousands of dollars on a booth or something like this. It's turning the event into an opportunity to create content. And then
that's not one of our goals at the event. It's not, obviously we always want to drive revenue and pipeline, but the way that we're planning next year's events is what content do we think we can get out of it? That's one.
Maybe doing like in-person interviews. I've seen a couple folks do that, where you bring marketers to your booth. And
Alina, our co-founder, actually joined me. I went to CXL Live in Austin a couple months ago, and she joined me and did interviews there.
I think I saw Mutiny doing that. Like they were interviewing folks there, and then they created content off of that.
Yeah, so we did the same. And then Arthur on our team also just loves being in front of the camera much more than I do. He's been trying that out at a couple in-person events too.
That's awesome. I'm curious, so how are you approaching actually building your audiences to get in front of your ICP?
Yeah, so I mentioned that our ICP is pretty tight, and you basically have to be a B2B marketer, which there's obviously a billion titles in marketing now, but mostly on the demand gen, like digital performance side of things. And then you also have to be on either HubSpot or Salesforce as your CRM. So we are able to build out that technographic list of accounts with metadata. And then I also use that to layer on the job titles. So sometimes we want to go super broad and we want everyone in marketing to see that content. Other times we want just marketing ops or just demand gen to see it. So we can build those different layers.
By the way, this is not a plug for metadata, everybody. Just Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not getting paid, but it is helpful to use for sure. And then there's other things we can do, obviously, on the list side. So, for example, I mentioned our newsletter. We obviously don't want people who are already subscribed to our newsletter to see ads for the newsletter because that would be silly. So we use that exclusion list that we have set up in HubSpot and just copy that over into metadata.
As far as the taking a step back on the content side and the copy and whatnot, do you find certain types of ads work better for you in terms of driving that objective you're after?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like this has changed a lot in the last couple of years, and probably it's just we're all spending way more time on LinkedIn, or at least I wasn't spending any time on LinkedIn a few years ago. But now our goal is really to look like an organic post that you would click on versus look like a brand ad. So I often have to like remove our brand logo from stuff because it's just built into designers' minds usually that has to be on there. So I've tested things like this exact same image, but with the logo on and not, and obviously without the logo usually performs better. And I'm able to justify that because obviously it's on paid social. You're seeing our logo is right beside it anyway, because it's posted in feed. Yep. So it's not like we're missing out on that brand affinity. They're still seeing that it's Chili Piper, but it's not so in their face that this post is an ad.
Yeah,
so that's one thing that we're really seeing works. And then just, again, making it look more organic. We've tried some ads that are pretty splashy, like video style, that I thought looked really good and nice. And I think they just looked too brandy and too much like ads. So people just seem to tune them out. Where if I have a recording like this and put that up as an ad, I'm sure that would work way better. And I've seen they're very similar results.
Yeah, definitely. There's a shift happening. The same best practices that you use organically to create content that resonates, that gets reactions, drives conversions, etc. It's the same thing. Advertising at the end of the day, the way I see it, it's just an amplifier. You're just amplifying. You're taking that piece of content and you're guaranteeing distribution. But the same best practices, approaches, etc. work. One of the things I always tell people, they're like, if they really want to get started on a new channel, I always say, learn how to become an effective content marketer on that channel, and you will be a great advertiser. Because if you understand the landscape, you understand the nuances, then you'll be able to take those best practices, those posts, and then even if you have a good organic following, you can test it first, and then you can boost it with something like ads.
Yeah, we're really lucky that it's not just luck, but we've built out a really strong LinkedIn presence. So we're able to test things organically first, where you mentioned Twitter ads when we were catching up earlier. We tried that out last year, but because we don't have a presence there, I wasn't able to really test anything organically. So I just had to make it up as I went along, and it did not go well at all. So we decided to pull the plug on that. But when you have an audience for
your newsletter, Twitter ads, it can be really, really
I need
powerful.
to get on that.
And it's super cheap.
Yeah, we're redoing the landing page. When that's done, I will.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you have metadata, which is awesome, but I'm not even using metadata for my Twitter ad campaign. I'm just using follower lookalikes. So you can choose like different top celebrities in the B2B space, and you can create lookalike audiences off that, and you can get in front of folks. The key is like the ad itself has to be specific to the B2B marketers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's awesome. Diving into, you're spending 70% of your budget on really demand creation, and how do you approach reporting and measurement to know that you're actually being successful?
Yeah, I think that's the toughest part when you're very top of funnel, the way that we are for a lot of our spend. So I try to balance it out with, I often get asked, what's the ROI of this? How are we calculating that? But I try to just bring the conversation back to what is our goal with this part of our spend. So I bucket the spend as brand awareness, essentially. So I know this part, I'm not expecting any direct demos. Obviously, we want to bring in pipeline further down the funnel, but for right now, the snapshot that we're looking at, it's just brand awareness. So I try to keep in mind that when I set goals and KPIs. One thing that we do a ton of is, I mentioned video earlier, we have a ton of video ads. So I actually go into the platforms and look at the video metrics and pull those numbers to show, basically not just to compare videos, but also to show, hey, people are really invested in what we had to say about this topic. We should create more of that.
So like view rates.
Yeah, view rate, completion, if people are clicking through after, but mostly view rate is a big one for video. And obviously video is a very time intensive resource to make usually. So it helps to make that case that we need more. The other thing I look at, which seems basic, but a lot of people don't do it, is going into LinkedIn and making sure that the right people are actually seeing our ads. So if the goal is brand awareness, then to me, the most important thing is that the right people are seeing it. So it doesn't really matter if people are clicking and looking at it if they're not the right people. So I just go into LinkedIn and I can pull lists of which accounts are looking at our ads, what titles, where are they in the world. And that helps to justify that spend as well, that we're on the right track.
Yeah, that's totally true. I'm curious on the videos that you're pushing. Are you, especially for awareness, are you just doing videos in feed? Are you driving them to blog articles or some sort of landing page?
Mostly in feed. I want to play around with more. What I'm struggling with right now is a lot of them are actually podcast videos, and we're trying to figure out where we want to drive those people to. So we're just sticking with in feed for now.
Got it. Yeah. You definitely get like massive cost breaks, right? By putting the content in feed, et cetera. And then now are you guys using any of like for your remarketing audiences? Are you using like the video view segments where you can retarget people based on video consumption? I've
tried. Our lists are still pretty small. I would love to get that that targeted eventually. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get there. The last time I tried, our lists were mostly all too small for that because our top of funnel is already niched down.
Yep.
There's not too much we can do there, but eventually I'd love to play around with that.
I have one client. This is going to give you some, I guess, maybe some inspiration for everybody listening as well. I have this one client that for 365 days, 25% video views, the audience size of that one segment alone was like 850,000.
Wow.
It's ridiculous from like the one segment. So imagine like the potential that when you create these different segments and then you group them together to be able to bump up that audience size. So now that gives you the flexibility where you can layer in additional criteria. So now you can do retargeting, but you can do more personalized retargeting based on maybe certain personas where you wouldn't have that option before if you're just doing like web visits, because that's the only thing that we have available.
Yeah, that's smart to make it broad and then segment down from there.
What do you call it when it comes to your tech stack? I'm always curious, like every org is unique. What does your tech stack look like for paid media?
Yeah, so I can go pretty broad, but I'll start with kind of project management side. We use Asana, so I spend a lot of time in there because I work so cross-functionally. I always need something from someone to get ads live, so I use Asana for that. I mentioned Salesforce before. That's the CRM that we're on, so all of our data flows through into there. Our landing pages are on Webflow, and we use HubSpot for our forms. And then obviously we have Chili Piper for the booking, so someone fills out the HubSpot form, and then if they're qualified, we let them book. Metadata, again, they're not paying me for this, but we use them to, again, build audiences, also obviously launch campaigns, build the A/B testing that we want to try out on creatives. And then I'm trying to think what else. Mode is where our reporting and dashboards live. So I work really closely with our data team who owns basically everything in Mode. I don't really touch too much other than,
Mode. I don't think I've heard of that. Is that like a BI tool?
Yeah, it's like a Tableau or just, BI tool is probably the best way to put it. But they pull data from Snowflake into that so that I don't have to touch all of the data side of things.
Nice. So they'll basically aggregate all the data, and then from there you have a single view where you can see cost per actual opportunity from LinkedIn as an example, if it's a last touch campaign.
Yeah, and I can see basically as granular as how many opportunities do we have open like today from this source? What's the pipeline? And it's all filtered. Obviously, we use UTMs, which everyone should be doing, but we use UTMs for our paid. So anything that's grouped under the paid bucket, I have a whole dashboard that shows me everything. And then I can drill down by channel, by campaign, basically any term that I want.
How important would you say it is to, of all the reporting you have, I feel like, just in my experience, sometimes you're two ends of the spectrum. Either on the one hand, you have no visibility and you're just blind. You're just flying through the dark. Or on the other hand, you have too much information where you get crippled and almost like analysis paralysis. So big examples like attribution, like you just have this crazy attribution model that you've built and it's just, you're slow to make decisions. Of all your reporting, what would you say is the most essential that you can't live without?
Yeah, I would say that Mode dashboard that I worked with the data team to build is super helpful because it's all the things that that's basically all the open questions I had about paid, and they helped me build that. We don't have a very sophisticated attribution model today. I think that's a gap for us, but at the same time, I've been at companies where we pulled our hair out trying to figure that out for months and didn't really get anywhere productive. So there's pros and cons. Once you go down that road of making it too complicated, I think you can end up being analysis paralysis for sure, where you have too much information and you can't make any decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, when you have struggles and you're thinking through, what am I going to do with my paid ads? What resources do you lean on that really help you?
Yeah, internally or
just in general?
external?
It could be internal, external.
Yeah, I think I mentioned our data team. Obviously, they're a huge help to me internally. I used to try to pull what I could out of Salesforce, but it's not always the best place for that. And then just honestly, just the marketing team on Slack. I use that channel so much to just post, hey, is this weird? Does this make sense to you guys? What do you think of this? And then I'm sure every company has this, but we also have a great marketing channel where we just post like inspiration, ads people are seeing, things people like. So I always refer back to that when I feel stuck on something. I'll just scroll through that channel just to see what other people thought was interesting and worth flagging and go from there. I'm also in a ton of Slack communities, probably too many. And I find that sometimes when I just need a break, either in between meetings, I don't have enough time to actually get anything done productively, or if I just need to like fresh ideas, you can post in some of those or just scroll comments, but overwhelming all the communities on Slack, to be honest.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done that's super helpful. So one of the biggest challenges with being, I don't know, for lack of a better word, like expertise and expert in your field is we don't elicit enough feedback from outside eyes. So one of the most valuable things that I've done in the past that's really helpful is hire another expert to do an audit of your activities. So you get an objective outside view of what's going on. And then that can help you like unlock certain things like, oh, I didn't see it that way. Or yeah, maybe that is a gap that we're missing because we have our blinders on.
That's smart. Yeah, I feel like it's tough, especially I'm a team of one. So I don't really have anyone in my exact role to bounce ideas off of. You can see how that outside perspective would really help.
Tara, if you had to give advice to somebody that, you know, they are a team of one like yourself and they're starting up a paid media program at their company, what would you tell them?
I would say start with the less fun stuff. I know there's a lot of emphasis on A/B testing, creative testing, figuring out the right messaging. But if you don't have your audiences right, you're going to be wasting money and you're not going to come away with relevant insights anyway. So it's not that fun. It's not that flashy, but I would start with your audiences and especially exclusions. That's something that I'm trying to keep a closer eye on these days, especially when every dollar always counted, but it counts even more now. So exclusions are huge.
That's awesome. I hope you guys got a ton out of this. I know I did. Just to quickly recap, number one, the sooner you can start to create demand, the better. And really, you have to have it from the top down, right? You have to have that alignment from the business level because ultimately that's going to be a huge blocker. And then making sure that you guys are really taking advantage of the content available and you're repurposing it across different things and you're promoting that content. And one of my biggest takeaways is just the fundamentals. Like if your ad is not getting in front of the right person, like everything else is just going to suffer, right? Amazing. Tara, if people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn, pretty easy to find, and I'm trying to post more, so please follow me so I have some motivation.
Check out Tara
to
on
post
LinkedIn,
more.
Follow her after this, and if you guys haven't already subscribed to Demand Gen Chat, I highly recommend it. Thank you so much, Tara.
Thanks so much for having me.